Good day, everybody. I would like to introduce, this is Matt Martirano from the owner and founder of Checkout Champ. You all probably know me. You've seen my lovely aging face at all the conferences. And today I brought Fraud Deflect, Scott Adams and Ryan Levon on to talk to everyone about VAMP. So over the past couple of weeks, this has been looming since, what, May, Scott?
Actually, January, but it changed
January, and then
drastically
they
in May to make it even harder.
pulled it back. Visa, they being Visa, they pulled it back, and then they started ramping it back up in May, and then they pulled it back, and they said we're going to go live with this thing in October. And when they say go live with it, I still don't understand who's making the decision to do this because they have RDR, they have other tools in place that help with chargebacks, but now VAMP, according to my understanding of it, it has to do with the TC40s. And when I talk to merchants, we have some of the largest merchants in e-com. Not a single one of them have ever seen a TC40 from their acquirer. And most of them don't even know what the heck it is. So we're going to go through this today. We're going to talk about what's a TC40, what's the other TCs that they're looking at, how Visa is calculating those ratios, and what that effect will be on the e-commerce, the brand owners, the product owners, and how they can go about protecting it. So let's just jump right in. Uh, Ryan, well, let's start with Scott. Scott, give us a little bit of your background and a little bit of Fraud Deflect, and then we'll go to Ryan, and then we'll go into some of the questions that I have that I think are burning throughout the industry.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. So as Matt said, I'm Scott Adams, CEO and co-founder of Fraud Deflect. So I've been a payments fraud and risk for pushing 25 years now. Started out just like all you guys. The first 10, 15 years of my career, is pre-checkout champ, I believe, but I was selling e-commerce, background checks, public records, all sorts of high risk, negative option rebill, all these kind of things that a lot of you guys do today. But I didn't have tools such as Fraud Deflect or Checkout Champ, so I had to build it all myself. This was back in starting in the late 90s. So I've done this a long time. I learned what a chargeback was through that and how this works. And I had a business doing well, started getting crates of chargebacks. Literally, some of you guys might remember, literally getting crates, these plastic white things you got from the post office. I know Ryan's familiar because I know his background, but so I did that. We exited that company. I ended up working at Riot Games. If you're a video game fan, League of Legends. I was there about 5 years, fixed their fraud risk problems. That was actually my first brush with the TC40s, which we'll talk about in a minute. After Riot, I got, as a consultant, a friend from Riot brought me into Epic, the makers of Fortnite. So as they launched and got all that going, same thing, fixed their fraud problems. Then was lucky enough as a consultant also to work with Visa on BMPI, which is the predecessor to Order Insight, and the word over my shoulder there, deflections. So, been doing this a long time. Started Fraud Deflect because we couldn't find a really good solution to chargeback management. A lot of companies out there, and there's some I like, but most we just didn't trust, did not have good experiences. So we started Fraud Deflect, and it's been going really well. And we love working with Checkout Champ and with Matt, and Ryan's actually one of our merchants too.
Very good. Ryan, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and how you're a part of the Fraud Deflect team?
Cool. Yeah. So my name is Ryan Levin. I've been doing e-commerce sales, jewelry, subscriptions, apparel, all sorts of e-com products my entire life. I started my first business when I was 15 years old out of my parents' basement. I was a pretty early Amazon seller, and I got introduced into the chargeback space when I was 15, 16 years old with the Amazon A to Z claims, which took my business out at a very young age. Shortly after that, me and a couple friends in college figured out what Shopify was. We figured out what Facebook ads were, and we figured we might be able to take a real run at this thing and not have to go get a normal 9-to-5 job. So me and my friend Zach, my friend John, and a bunch of other guys had a brilliant idea of going to rent a mansion in the suburbs of Philadelphia to try to build an e-commerce incubator. So we found the house that we wanted to live in. It was a 9-bedroom, 13,000 square foot house on 30 acres, and we thought this is perfect. This is where we're going to start our business careers. And now the only problem was we got to convince the owner of this opulent house to let us all in, which, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys, it's not easy to do. So we wound up meeting with the guy. He sold a company to Comcast, and he really liked that we were young, hungry entrepreneurs. And he said, I'll give these kids a shot, and said he would rent the house to us. But the problem was we didn't have the 35 grand at the time for last month and deposit. So we had a brilliant idea of let's put our Amex cards into our PayPal accounts and pull as much money as we can off of them to give this guy the rent to get us into the house. That all wound up working out somehow. We got into the house and we recruited about 7 to 8 other guys and built this incubator where we were just all gonna work together to start churning revenue and build internet businesses. About 6 to 9 months into that journey, I stumbled upon Checkout Champ through one of Matt's Twitter posts, actually, and was like, I'm having a lot of problems on Shopify. Let's see what this is all about. And once I got into Checkout Champ and saw all of the customizations and implementations that I can make to my business on Checkout Champ that I'm not able to do on Shopify, it was a total game changer. And we went from doing, 20K, 30K, 50K months to every single guy in the house doing $1, $2, $5 million months on Checkout Champ. So it was absolutely insane. But when you're young, you're hungry, you're turning off 3DS and AVS, chargebacks come with that. So, we had just as much paper chargebacks coming to the house as product shipping out. And that's when I ran into Scott, the founder of Fraud Deflect, and turned on Fraud Deflect on our businesses. And, previously a couple of guys in the group, yeah, we've used, some of the competitors in the space, but we never really had a product that could make a significant enough difference to keep us afloat. And when I saw the results that we were getting on Fraud Deflect throughout the house, that's when I approached Scott and was like, I want to make a deal with you. I want to help grow this thing. So for the last 3 years, that's been my main thing with Scott, is jumping on board at Fraud Deflect to help grow this. So that's
Well,
my
let's talk about that for a minute, Ryan. So as a young guy getting into e-com, right? The first thing that people tell you is, oh, you need a Stripe account, which is, Shopify payments.
Yep.
Which, so everyone understands. But the inherent problem with that is you start getting up to 0.7, 0.8% in chargebacks, they start shutting down your accounts.
Yes. Go ahead.
So with that, as your chargebacks start coming in, especially as you're turning off the AVS and all the other features that are there to kind of help you, just so you can bring in more sales, you're now faced with a company shutting down your entire processing business and holding your money for 180 to 365 days. And what do you do? Right? So you need to get chargebacks under control, and you probably need to diversify a little bit away from Stripe. And I'm not saying Stripe's bad. We're a Stripe partner, love them, but there are other solutions that you can stack onto your processing to enhance the volume that you can take, but to de-risk the merchant side of things.
Yeah, it's really, really crucial, especially for younger, young to middle-aged businesses in the e-com space, to diversify your risk, get multiple merchant accounts, because you as a business owner, your business might be clean, but you don't know what's going on you don't know what's going on at that bank, or how hot the bin is. So it's important to spread out your volume. That way, you don't have all your eggs in one basket. And when we're getting into VAMP, I think Scott's going to have some pretty good information on why it's so important for merchants to spread out their risk now that there's these new VAMP rules.
Yep. Well, yes. As far as VAMP goes, guys, well, maybe we ought to start talking about like just really what it is, because like as Matt was just telling us before the call started, most of those merchants hadn't talked about it yet, and now it's been around for a while, but that's one of the problems with the space. A lot of times the information does not get to the merchant, right? There's too many people in the mix. And so that's something I try to do, is get that merchant information out there. But if you didn't know before this, you might not know. So really, here's the thing. VAMP's basically a combination of a couple different programs. Visa used to literally have like 4, 5, 6 programs, and no one had really ever heard of most of them. But the big ones for us, those in the merchant world, was what they had: VDMP and VFMP. So this was Visa's dispute monitoring and Visa's fraud monitoring programs. And they've kind of decided that, they wanted to bring this stuff all together. They also had some programs that monitored acquirers, issuers. And so now the acquire merchant side have been joined up, and really actually made confusing. So, and as Matt said, there's TC40 plays into this big time now, which again, something most merchants have never heard of. So how VAMP works is that just the same as always with your chargebacks. So when you get a chargeback in, whenever that's reported, that counts against you. Even if you win in representment, it still counts against you. But now, to make it harder.
By the way, that's an interesting point to make. Even if you win the chargeback, it counts against your hard counts.
Correct.
Your hard counts are total number of chargebacks in a monthly period and the percentage.
Yeah, well, so yeah, it's the count, it's not the dollar amount. Yeah. Right. So but that's nowadays with VAMP, that's only one part of the problem. So you have chargebacks, but then now you also have TC40s. And if you aren't familiar with that, what a TC40 is I like to call it a fraud flag transaction. So if you think about the customer journey, right? So they purchase your product, they decide they want their money back, be it because it was fraud and they didn't do it, or they say they didn't do it, or they have a dispute with you, whatever the reason. They call their issuer. So, they think it's Visa, but they call Citibank or Capital One or somebody. And they say, hey, I didn't do this. It's fraud. I don't like the product, whatever the case. At that point, the issuer has a choice. So generally, they have no information. So they'll just side with the merchant. Now, unless you're using certain products. And so one of the things that we focus on heavily at Fraud Deflect is deflection. And so if you're not using these products to deflect this, then the bank might press chargeback, but they could also press fraud. And the even more difficult thing here is that if they press fraud, that's TC40. If they press chargeback, it's a chargeback. But they can press both, right? So if you look at your chargebacks now, you might see a reason code. If it's a 10 dot something, 10.4 is super common, that's chargeback for fraud. That'll be a TC40 and it'll be a chargeback. And unless you're using things to prevent this stuff, it counts. Both of them do. So for VAMP, it's TC40 plus chargeback divided by your settled transactions. And this is just Visa though. So you take TC40 plus Visa chargebacks, divide by your settled Visa transactions. And that's all in the same calendar month. So for example, October's around the corner here, and that's the first month that VAMP is going to start enforcement. So what Visa will do is they'll look at your chargebacks, TC40s from September. They'll then divide that by your settled Visa transactions from September. And then about middle of the month sometime, your acquirer will get a notice, and then you might get a notice. So it's difficult because the problem with TC40, most of you guys have probably never heard of it. And the only reason I have really is one, I'm deep in the space, but as a merchant, I heard about it just because I was working with really big merchants and especially low ticket. But you see a lot of TC40s in low ticket. You see a lot of TC40s in recurring. In general, if you don't know your TC40 rate, it's probably double your chargeback rate. And that's scary because you got to add those together now and divide. And that comes up with your VAMP ratio.
And so for a standard merchant, Scott, if they've never heard of a TC40 or never seen the TC40s, how are they calculating this? Are they just relying on the bank to give them the numbers and assume that they're accurate? And you have some, trained monkey back there just pushing buttons, chargeback fraud. they probably just automate it, mark everything as fraud. If it comes back as a chargeback, oh, I never received my product, depending on what that chargeback code is, it's probably just automated. So the long story short is the likelihood could be that a vast majority of those transactions will still be marked as a TC40 for fraud. And you're talking about just Visa, and Ryan, you can confirm this, probably 70% of the transactions that you're taking are on Visa, 30% MasterCard. That's the way it's been historically.
Yep, correct.
So just based on market penetration of card, you're putting your merchant accounts at significant risk.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. We see between 60 and 70% tends to be Visa in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And, so if you're selling to people in the US, Visa's always a majority. Definitely. And yeah, and these TC40s are just, they're scary because most people don't know about them, especially if you're a smaller merchant. And by small, I mean, under hundreds of millions of dollars a month.
Yeah.
So many of you are, most of you probably are, right?
And you bring up another good point. It's not just US. This is worldwide.
Global. It's everywhere. It's going live all across the world. Definitely States, definitely Europe, South America. South America actually has a little bit different thresholds, but across the board, it's supposed to be enforced starting in a few days now on October 1st.
I feel like this is the Visa's Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light moment where someone really made a bad decision. they're gonna get their butt kicked because their stock values are going to drop significantly. They still have to answer to their shareholders. So, something could possibly change, but until that happens, you got to be ready for it. So, Scott, Ryan, how do these merchants that have maybe postponed their urgency of looking into VAMP and how to protect themselves? First of all, let's talk about let's say they get nailed with VAMP, whatever they're calling that, right? They're getting hit with it. Is there a cost to it? What is number one, the calculation? And based on that calculation, how much does it cost for every, VAMP notification? And could, based on that VAMP ratio, the merchant also lose their merchant accounts?
Yeah, so this is actually an interesting question. So let's take it in reverse order. Absolutely, you can lose your account. I was at a conference last week or a couple weeks ago. I ran into a couple of the pretty big, medium, higher risk acquirers. And I just went up to them and said, hey, what are you doing about VAMP? Their answer? Oh, I'm going to be terminating 2,000 merchants. Oh, I'm going to be terminating 5,000 merchants. It wasn't corrective. It was like, no, I'm terminating tons of merchants because we don't know what to do. It's such a new problem. And so, so my answer was, well, what if I can help you? Right? Fraud Deflect can help. We'll get to that more later. But so yeah, you can definitely use your account. As far as costs, this is where it gets interesting. So Visa doesn't deal direct with merchants. So they've put, in VAMP, they've put some costs to it, but that'll go to the acquirers. And it's similar, not that different from what VDMP and VFMP was. But we don't know what the acquirers are going to do as far as how are they going to mark this up? Are they going to pass the numbers through? And then maybe you're not with a direct big acquirer, you're with an ISO or a sub ISO or a sub ISO. So honestly, man, I don't have a direct for sure answer, but my guess and what I've kind of heard, it's probably going to be pretty similar to your chargeback fees. And so you'll get a fee, maybe a higher fee because you're in VAMP, because you're over threshold. But here's the bigger question. Now that TC40s count in your ratio, are they going to charge you for those too? Because Visa is going to charge the acquirer, which they never did before.
That's a great point.
They do now.
I talked to a big merchant yesterday, and he said, Matt, you're still getting, if you get an RDR, you're still paying your $15 to $18 for your RDRs, but then the ISO is charging you $30 on top of that. He's like, so now you have a $19 transaction. You're upside down,
upside down 2 or 3 times,
$53. If the banks start charging for the acquirers, is what I mean, the acquiring bank starts charging for these VAMP notifications on top of what the penalties from Visa are, I mean, it could be a losing proposition for anyone who doesn't
Yeah.
have this under control.
Yeah, and pay close attention. One thing I said earlier, to be super clear, there will be duplicates. You cannot dedupe these things. So if you have a chargeback that's a 10.4, fraud unauthorized, that will be a TC40. So again, if they're charging, and that, Visa is going to charge the acquirer a fee for that. And it depends on what level the acquirer is at. Yeah, I would bet that gets passed through, and probably not passed through, probably marked up and passed on. So so really, I don't know. That's the thing. You used to know, now you know. Where it's going to be very interesting late October, early November, because November is when the money will be pulled out of the acquirer's accounts. So I assume they're probably going to fine/charge merchants before then. But it's a lot of this is unknown. That's the really scary part. It's either terminate or remediate, and I'm sure there's fines and fees that they'll pass in. And only way to know is to see what happens. So I would say, if you don't know on that part, talk to your acquirer. You need to ask them, ask your ISO, whoever got you your merchant account. This is vital. Ask them, what is your VAMP rate? Many of them will not know. That's something, again, that Fraud Deflect can help with. Ask them, what are the fees going to be? Right.
Mhm.
And I've not heard one answer. Like, I've got them across the board. Some pass through, some mark up, some don't know yet.
That's a great question.
It's
I'm on a
tough.
call with the CEO of Curve this afternoon, and I'm going to ask him that question because this is specifically about VAMP. What are the fees?
And more importantly, what are the fees to the merchant? Right. Because the
Yes.
acquirer has a set of fees. Are they going to just pass those through plus a chargeback fee? Are they going to just do a VAMP fee per item on the VAMP list, which would be TC40 and chargeback? We don't know. I'd love to hear what they tell you. And I'm going to be bugging all my acquire friends to find out what they're going to be doing in October. Once things really hit the fan, then we'll know what's happening.
Which incidentally is tomorrow.
It is. It is.
All right, so let's run through that scenario. You're a merchant, you're doing, several $100,000 or several $1 million a month, and you've worked very hard to maintain your chargeback ratios between below the 1% threshold, right? Which was now you're a great merchant in the eyes of the acquirers. Well, now they start throwing in the VAMP ratios and the TC40s that you are unaware of. And if that is out of hand, now you're talking about being double dinged. We're going to figure out what the fees are. And I think, what I'm hearing Scott say to everyone who's watching this, go back to your acquiring bank and ask them specifically what it's going to cost you whenever you get nailed with VAMP.
Yep.
What are they called? Inquiries, queries?
I think they're calling them disputes. Because even in TC40, it's a disputed transaction. It's just one that may or may not become a chargeback.
Well, and if Visa and MasterCard end up getting a hold of this video, the question I have for you is, why is it always the merchant's fault? Is it because they have the money that's coming in? And why are you not looking at the behavior of the consumer when you know that friendly fraud, because that's what this TC40 is, friendly fraud is still fraud. They're committing fraud and stealing. It's like shoplifting from Nordstrom's, which I guess, according to the last administration is legal, but it's shoplifting in a digital form. So I think eventually we need to address that overall issue. But now that I'm off my soapbox, let's talk about, Scott and Ryan, how these merchants can protect themselves. How does Fraud Deflect? I know that you're telling me you have tools that can help these merchants manage this to an acceptable level. I'll stop talking. I'd love to hear what you guys have available.
Yes. So Scott, why don't you go through the product stack, how we're getting merchants, their real-time VAMP rate, and what impact we can make on their VAMP rate.
And does the quality of data that you're receiving from the system impact your success rate against the disputes?
Yeah, so let me add one more just fact to all this, that we talking about the threshold, but I haven't actually told you what it is. That's for a minute, it sounds good, but it's really not. So the threshold for merchants in the VAMP excessive program, the sounds high, is 2.2%. Now, April, it goes down to 1.5%. But there's also acquire thresholds. So for above standard, where they start getting fined, is 0.5%. And excessive for acquirers is 0.7%. But here's another scary point. Many acquirers I'm talking to are actually going to hold the merchants to the acquire thresholds. So don't say, oh, great, I did figure my numbers and I'm at 1.9. Well, again, ask your acquirer. What are they going to hold you to? Right? Because it's across their portfolio. But let's say they're on the high side. Let's say they're edging up toward getting fined. They're going to go to the merchant and say, okay, where do I lower this? How do I lower it? I got to get my merchants to get these lower, right? So that's the other fact, right? We don't know what each one's going to do, but that's the numbers that we have. And I've seen a lot of acquirers reaching out to their ISOs and saying, give them a list. It's like anyone who has so many TC40s or so many chargebacks, remediate or terminate. It's scary because that's not even based on percentage. That's just, hey, you have a bunch of these, you need to have less.
Well, and understand that if the acquirers start receiving fines, shit always rolls downhill. You're going to end up paying for them, and you're not paying what the acquirers are paying. You're going to pay a markup for the fine, for the convenience of them having to deal with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, so now to your original question. So what can you do? I think in a lot of ways we're taking a little bit of a step back in some ways, right? So the last few years or so, I'm sure you've all basically relied on RDR. A lot of you guys have gotten RDR. There's some provider through your acquire, you never know. And it's worked great, right? Because RDR removed the chargeback. So you might have a bunch of disputes, but they don't count because you have RDR. Awesome. Here's the problem. RDR only removes the chargeback from VAMP. So if you get a chargeback for fraud and or a TC40 that's not associated with a chargeback, that still counts. RDR will not stop it. And so what we recommend is some pre-auth anti-fraud. So like at Fraud Deflect, we have something we call FDID, that is behavioral device fingerprinting, velocity checks, some things like that. Call it light pre-auth. Then you let the authorization go through. The issuer, Visa, everybody does their anti-fraud on it. Then the next step is you could do some manual review. You could do some post-auth anti-fraud. Just kind of look at things. What makes sense, right? Should you let somebody buy 12 times in an hour? Most businesses, you should not, right? So think about your business. But then now the next thing you can do is, so at Fraud Deflect, what we focus on actually are what we call deflections.
Wait, hold on.
So go ahead.
Be specific. If you're letting someone buy 12 times in an hour, that's your velocity checks.
Yes. Yeah, sorry.
Your backend platform should have tools in place that prevents that from happening. Checkout Champ does. Sorry.
Yep.
I just wanted you talked about velocity, and that's exactly what you're referring to.
Yep, exactly. And so one thing, we do with Checkout Champ is, so we use our FDID, we pass that through to them. And then so you can use that, or you can use IP, all sorts of things. But yeah, set some velocity rules with your PSP, with Checkout Champ. And then the next step, so let's say that goes through, they place the order, and then they call their credit card company. Like I said earlier, without their tools, they really know nothing. The issuer just thinks it's fraud because you said it's fraud, or not you, but your consumer. We have a tool we call deflections. It's using tools like Order Insight, Compelling Evidence, First Party Trust, Consumer Clarity, these kind of things, in combination with really good data. The better the data, the better this all works. And what happens is that during that phone call, we get in the middle. We send data real time to the issuer, and we kind of tell a few stories, right? We say, issuer one, this is a great merchant. They're doing their due diligence. They're doing their anti-fraud. They're using a great, CRM system like Checkout Champ. They have all this data. They've got anti-fraud data. here's the whole shopping cart. Here's what they bought. Here's the person. It's the same name. I'm basically almost daring them to charge us back because we're going to win in representment. Issuers don't like that. They don't want chargebacks. They especially don't want representments because it takes a lot of man hours. So the beauty of this is all real time. If you get deflection, it's not an alert. We just saved your sale. And if you save your sale, you have no dispute. You had no TC40. So we've seen that dramatically lower VAMP rates, chargeback rates, TC40 rates, increase lifetime value, especially if you're a subscription merchant. If we save your sale, they're going to not only keep your money today, but live the bill another day, right? So that's kind of the deflection part of our service, which we are doubling down on, tripling down on, because I think it's where things need to go, right? We're collaborating with issuers. We're doing what Matt said. We're kind of putting it back in the consumer side and the issuer side by providing more information. And actually, Checkout Champ is one of our best partners with that because they have such good information. They have the full shopping cart, all this data that we can use to frame this telephone call at the issuer.
All right. So
You
one
said
other
that, Matt?
question that I think comes to mind: does 3D Secure, utilizing 3D Secure, help protect against, obviously it protects against the chargebacks because it puts it back on the acquirer or the issuer. Does it help against the VAMP ratio?
So it does, but here's the good and the bad, right? Like you said, you're right. It does certain chargebacks. It'll push back the liability to the issuer. And if that happens, that doesn't appear on your VAMP rate. The problem is that if it's flagged as a consumer dispute, not unauthorized, it'd still become a chargeback. You don't get liability for that, a liability shift for that. Second, it does not count on recurring. So your initial transaction will be protected with Resecure, but not the subsequent merchant-initiated transactions. And so you still need products like this to do deflections. But yeah, it can be a good help. And here's the other problem is that you'll see a lower authorization rate, so a higher decline rate. And oftentimes we will see a lowering of chargebacks, but then we also see a shift of the reason codes. So it's like, the issuers don't really want you to use that because it's just liability back to them. So generally we don't recommend it unless you're a single purchase, high ticket.
Mhm.
Then it starts to make more sense, right? Because then the consumer is more motivated to go through with a purchase, and then they can use, log into their bank, all that kind of stuff that it takes to authorize one of those charges.
All right. Well, I have a shameless plug that you probably don't know about. So we are now, we have integrated 3DS 2.2, which is 3RI, which does protect the subsequent transactions going forward for subscriptions, which is kind of an interesting product. And it's totally frictionless, which we've seen direct data that the initial approvals are higher than the 2.0.
That's awesome.
They're not as great as it's not exactly as high as not having 3DS plugged in, but it's only a couple points lower to protect your business. So let's say you had your 3DS 2.2 with recurring, and you had fraud deflect protecting against the chargebacks that do squeeze through, and the VAMP disputes. I think that provides you with full coverage across the board.
And that sounds really good. Yeah, you're right. I did not know about that. But yeah, that sounds great. If it protects against recurring, that was a big failure on 3DS in the past. So that's great. And I believe the newer versions too, you can pass more data, and the data can allow a risk-based authentication too. So you don't have to have a pop-up and things like that. So that can be much better as well.
Yep.
So that's great. And then so that fails, we use that similar data for a deflection. And then too, if deflections fail, we have the old stuff, right? We still have Verify CDRN. We have Ethica alerts, which are both very effective. And the beauty of them is that unlike RDR, those are outside of the rails for a chargeback, right? RDR is basically a chargeback, right? So, but Ethica and CDRN are not. Ethica and CDRN are a refund before they get a chance to even hit the chargeback button. So combine
Well,
all this
I've been
together.
doing this a long time too, Scott, as you can tell.
You have.
We talked about how back in the late 90s, we used to call those pre-disputes.
Yeah, basically that's what they are, right? It's before the dispute button's hit. So it does not count against you,
Yeah.
either in TC40 or chargeback. Now, some could still become TC40. Depends on how they short coded it. But it does significantly drop your TC40 as well. And so, to me, I've always said this as a merchant, you've got to have a multi-layer approach, right? So if you do, and I also like to tell merchants, make sure to align your process, right? If you have a marketer saying one thing about your product, maybe it's not true, or maybe it's embellished, then they come to your sales page, your order page, and it doesn't match, you have a lower conversion rate. But let's say it matches enough and they go ahead and make the purchase, but then they get the product and it doesn't line up with the promises, right? So get things as aligned as you can. And then second, think about match solution with 3DS. Third, think about pre-auth anti-fraud. And then now to the post-auth side, you've got deflections and alerts and these kind of tools and FDID from Fraud Deflect. You've really got it all covered. In general, that should get that VAMP rate way down and get you under threshold.
Yeah, so those 5 points that you just made, I think going back to the first piece with the product, make sure the product is what you say it is. But as Ryan will attest, communicating with your customers, right? If there's a shipping delay, whatever it might be. I actually bought a product 2 days ago, and I got a great thank you letter from the CEO of the company. It wasn't just like an order confirmation. It was also several hours after. It says, "Hey, Matt, thanks for coming to our company. We're veteran-owned business. Thank you for ordering the product. Support like yours really helps us grow our company. If you decide to come back and buy other things, here's a 15% discount. But we just want to say thank you." So communicating to your customers, giving them the ability to access you, right? And if you're doing subscriptions and you don't have a member access portal, you're just going to be dead in the water. Actually, I think it's required now. The FTC tried to force it, but I think they pulled back on it because who knows what the reason is, but you should have a member portal. If you're not running subscriptions, you should still have a way, if you're selling single time product, for your customers to go in and track the status of their order. And if there's an issue with it, if it's broken, if it's lost, if it's, whatever it is, if it's a great product, they should be able to give you a testimonial right there. If it's a bad product, let them give you the feedback so you know how to improve. But you should always have a way for your customers to access you and give you feedback and change their cancel, update.
Over communicate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
For the guys out there who, you might be growing your business by yourself, you don't have much help, reach out to your Checkout Champ rep. That they have a great template for a back-end order and subscription management portal that can make your life a whole lot easier. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I needed to build a subscription management portal. I reached out to my friend Josh at Checkout Champ, and he sent me a template that I could work off of, and it saved me, 10, 20 hours of work. So reach out to if you ever have any questions or you're stuck somewhere, the Checkout Champ account managers are great resources.
Thank you. All right. So now that we've covered this and we've put the fear of the Visa gods into the merchants in e-commerce, how do they get a hold of Fraud Deflect to learn about the products that you offer?
So you can definitely email info@frauddeflect.com, go to our website, frauddeflect.com, or we actually have probably I think one of our best, if not the best integration with a CRM, Checkout Champ. You can go right in, where's a Matt? Like you go to admin, plugins, chargeback, something like that.
Right in the plugin section, like in the marketplace, you can click for more information. It'll take you to their site. And as Ryan was saying, if you just ask your account manager, anyone, even if you don't know who it is, you just contact us and we'll put you right in contact with Ryan and Scott and their team, and off you go.
Yep. Awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
If you're watching this video and you're not on Checkout Champ and you're on some other funnel builder or other storefront builder, you got to come take a look at what we're doing and why the largest brands in the world are using Checkout Champ today. Ryan will tell you the story. They were knocking out 12 to 15 sales sites per day on Checkout Champ because it's that easy.
And I
Yeah,
saw your new stuff. Have you launched the new builders yet too,
Oh, we
Matt?
did. We just launched the new storefront builder. It's all AI driven. And let's say you have a storefront on a very popular uh, storefront company, CMS. Let's just call it a CMS. You can actually, we have the tool where you can go into your AI engine and say, can you replicate this store in HTML and CSS? You take that package, drop it right into our AI builder, and it replicates it exactly, including all the navigation, the drop downs. It makes it super simple.
yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
There's no excuses anymore. Get out there and drive some revenue.
That's right. Especially with Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming up, this is now the time to set yourself up for success, right?
Yep.
Why should you, yeah, struggle with a 2 to 3% conversion rate when you could be converting in the tens, the 20s all day long, right? You just have to change the way you're doing business, and there are tools out there like ours that can help you do that.
Yeah,
And
and then
then
protect
doing
the
more.
lifetime value too.
That's right. And as you're increasing more transactions, obviously you're exposing yourself to greater chargeback risk. And that's where Fraud Deflect comes in. So it's all about scaling. And if you do it the right way, you can succeed and you can beat the competition.
Yeah, one thing I always noticed that is really rewarding for me with Fraud Deflect is that a lot of times merchants like Ryan come to us and they're like, yeah, I just can't get scaling because I have all these chargeback problems. And I even remember when I hired my first sales guy for this company, I promised him, like an average, this is our average merchant. First month goes by, he's saying, wait, these numbers are way lower than you told me. I said, no, just wait. I swear, half the merchants that come in have this problem. Within a couple of months, they're blowing through their caps on their meds. Because once you don't have to worry about chargebacks, you can focus on your business. Do what you do best. Don't worry about chargebacks.
That's right. All right. Ryan, any parting words of wisdom?
For the merchants out there who are terrified of VAMP, you're in the subscription space, Nutra space, whatever it may be, we have a great product for you. I know we have a handful of clients that are on Checkout Champ right now. We've reduced their VAMP rate by 40, 50, some at 60%. So we have a product today that can help reduce your VAMP exposure. And again, like I said before, if you're not on Checkout Champ and you're on one of the old archaic platforms, take a serious look at it.
Thank you. Scott, Ryan, I appreciate your time today. We are going to get this cut up. We're going to get it out to the masses because we need to educate everybody as to what's coming because there are so many people that are calling us. They just don't know. So it's all about the sharing of information and helping people prepare for VAMP and other things that could really affect their business.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for having us on, Matt.
All right. You guys stay on.